Coming up on Market to Market, the price a community pays after the floodwaters recede.
But that's something that the market...
And market analysis with John Roach. Market to Market, the weekly journal of rural America. Hey everybody, welcome inside the MTOM podcast studio recording room here at Iowa PBS, which is where this podcast originates from each and every Tuesday. You can subscribe on our YouTube channel of Market to Market or wherever you get your podcasts. This is one of 3 that we offer. This is no minor league deal. We have a big-time guest today, Uncle Hedge, or the Hedge Whisperer. He goes by the name of that on Twitter, but his real name is Stephen Ellis. He's a producer from Virginia. We're going to talk to him about production in Virginia, his operation, and also one of the businesses that he's been involved with for a few years and find out what's going on there. Then we're going to start talking about Twitter, social media, ag production, and all sorts of great topics. This is a fun one. He gives us a hard time on Twitter, and maybe he's giving a couple of you a hard time. We'll see how that discussion goes. If you have any feedback for me, hit me up at paul.yeager@iowapbs.org. Again, let's hop in to this discussion, and we hope you enjoy our MTOM podcast with Stephen Ellis. Do I really know what I'm getting into by agreeing to talk to you? Who are you? Tell me, who are you? At Celis_1984. You're an enigma to an extent, Stephen.
Well, I am me, who is a fairly quiet farmer in Eastern Virginia. And I'm also a Twitter person who has been in the ag Twitter realm now for 8 or 9 years. And because I am a quiet Virginia farmer, the only way I could get from anybody to pay any attention to me was not to be quiet on Twitter. So I needle, I pick, I take whatever everybody considers to be the givens and try to figure out why they're not given and question anything that anybody is saying, everybody is saying, and try to just bring it from a different angle. And because I brought it from a different angle, I got a little attention, built up a nice Twitter following. And then I was playing music in my cab of my tractor, which I was wont to do. And after too many warnings, I woke up one morning without a Twitter account. And so I started fresh about a year ago with 300 people that were on a restaurant page that I'd started for a restaurant I was running and did not use much, and went back and have built that back up decent over time. And the people that wanted to hear what I had to say found me eventually. And some of them took it as a good time to let me go.
I always call that an Elsa. They just let it go. Don't hold you back anymore.
That's right.
Okay, so Eastern Virginia, let's talk about that first. Home area, is that where you grew up?
Yep. Been here forever. My family's been here forever. I had a grandmother do some type of history, and somebody in our family came over in 1610. And that's how long we've been here. A church was formed in 1772. It's just never not been here. It is a wonderful area, and you get all your 4 seasons. It gets hot, gets cold, everything. The downfall is farming is plenty of rain, no soil to hold the moisture. So we are constantly within 2 to 3 weeks of drying out and losing crop. So it rains almost every 2.5, 3 weeks. It's just those times that it doesn't, it catches up with you quick.
You are in a moist area. I don't know if you have a aversion to that word, but it always seems to be humid. When I've been to DC, the bogs, and you're I don't know, a couple hours from there. Is that just a regional pattern thing? Something to do with where you're located closer to the sea, or what is it?
It is. The Appalachian Mountains are 3 hours to our west, and the oceans to our east, and it looks like in the summertime and wintertime sometimes, but mostly the summer area, the southern winds just bring moisture. It kind of gets trapped between the mountains and the ocean, and if it gets in that pattern, we get thunderstorms every 3 or 4 days in the summer. And if it does that, we grow as good a crop as anybody. David Hewlett's in this area. As you know, he can grow corn with everybody. But I can't do what he does, but we do have the same weather pattern. So it can get really nice. And then it also, if you miss that rain and, you'd go up 3 weeks to a month without one, you can cut your yield in half and just that one batch of bad weather at the wrong time. It's a lot of areas like that. A lot of the South is like that.
What are you growing? What's on the farm?
Corn, soybeans, wheat, and a little bit of barley. The barley used to be a larger part of us because we double crop, and that comes off a little sooner than wheat and gave the soybeans a little bit more time. But barley hasn't been in demand as much, so we scale back, kind of grow that for our cover crops, and we cover crop almost every acre every year.
What drives what you plant? Is it market only?
Market and rotation. Our soils don't like you to grow the same thing over and over. So our normal rotation is a corn crop followed by spring. I call it spring. Wrong word. A winter soft red wheat crop that comes off in June with double crop soybeans behind that. We will cover crop the soybean land and then plant corn back into that following year. That is a normal rotation. We have a few farms that grow really good corn, and they actually do get corn 2 out of 3 years. But the third year, pretty much with all the humidity and all, the diseases start catching back up with you. So you need to rotate back out, get out of that corn fodder.
Where did the cover crop come in and why?
We are right by the Chesapeake Bay, and that was the ground zero for all of the protection of erosion and subsoil loss. And we're the guinea pig of the nation. So we started back in the 90s with no-till. And then no-till after that was the cover crop. And the theory in our sandy soils, which it actually was true, the government's not always wrong, but our winter crop, be it wheat, barley, or rye or something like that, grabs the nitrogen that would leach through our sandy soils and get down. Once it gets down 3 or 4 feet, a high water table in the winter, we're only, 10, 20 feet above sea level in a lot of places, mostly 60 to 100. But anyway, that subsoil water will take the nitrogen and then flush it. And I guess that is what's going into the rivers and bays. So they want us to keep something growing at all times, keep it green. And then that way it actually worked, is the excess nitrogen we didn't use gets taken up by the crop, the grass crop. And then that grass crop, when you kill it in the spring, decomposes and it's back on top of the ground again. So that's the theory, and it actually worked, and it really helped our organic matter also in our really sandy soils. We've got a nice little couple-inch mulch on top of some beach sand in some places. And we got some good soils too, but some of those others that you couldn't grow anything on are now producing almost average crop.
Is that what everyone does?
We've gotten probably to 70 or 80% coverage of people doing that now. Not everybody does the cover crop. Pretty much everybody does no-till. The only time something gets worked up now is if we rut it up from a wet fall or something like that. And then we probably won't do the whole field. But we're like at probably 97% no-till and probably 70% cover crop in our close area. As soon as you work away from the rivers and oceans, it gets into a little bit more of an area where people do what they've done for years, 50 years.
Was there some apprehension by some people,
yeah.
Maybe yourself included, to do it?
Yep. Everybody didn't want to be told to do anything. Nobody wanted to change, but it actually made all the farmers a lot more efficient. We went from moldboard plowing, field cultivating, rain, have to do it again to flush the soil back up. We went from a whole lot of labor to farm 1,000 acres to, not as much labor, and you can farm 4,000 and 5,000 acres. Not everybody, has that, but you can.
Okay, you're east of the Corn Belt. When you hear people in the area where we tape the show have apprehension about a cover crop because of whatever, I'm not asking you to be a proponent necessarily for everyone, but are there benefits that everyone can enjoy from a cover crop?
There are, unless you are too far north. I've learned this from friends on social media. If you're too far north, you need something to be able to. The ground needs to dry back out, and they don't get enough sun early. That they need a warmed up soil, and I can understand not doing it if you're too far north. But anywhere, the middle corn belt south, I just don't see where it's a problem. The problem is some people, you can let it grow too thick and have too much residue. So if you're in an area that's kind of mucky, you want to kill it a little bit earlier. But that thing of keeping the nutrients up in the top 6 inches of the soil instead of letting it go down is real, unless you've got the 3 foot of black dirt, and then it doesn't matter what you do. You can spill seed and it'll grow, and it just is a different animal. Growing in potting soil is different than anywhere else in the country.
Potting soil, is that what you called it?
Yeah, any of the black dirt that's pretty much the same, texture from top to bottom. It looks like what we buy, for $4 a bag, potting soil. We don't have that. We have a sandy base with a reddish clay little band between that and hopefully 8 inches of topsoil if you've taken care of it over 300 years.
What do you make of the whole Chesapeake Bay comparison, Gulf of Mexico? I just read something. I just started a book. It'll be a future podcast here about what the farmers have done into the Gulf of Mexico. When you look at water, it seems like if you want to hit a hot point on Twitter, mention WOTUS. People in water and farmers specifically get a little excited sometimes. What do you make of all that?
I agree with them. I don't think, the government should be in the business of making anybody do anything. I do think there are a lot of areas that a light cover, tile is so important in your area. We don't have that trouble here because I have soil drains, but tile is so important. You don't ever want to grow anything that could grow down and stop your tile up, but a barley or wheat or something, with a foot or two root mass to just grab a little bit of that excess nitrogen. That nobody in the Midwest decides to put a little extra on for higher yield and doesn't get used. But if they did decide to do that, grab a little bit of it, bring it back to the top and keep it at the tile, which will keep it at the running waters, which will, if any percentage of people do that, it should eventually help the Gulf of Mexico a little bit. I don't know, the science of it all. I won't say that I won't, but I do know that if that much land area, there has to be some runoff. There has to be some making it that far.
Whose responsibility is it to work on water that might be a couple of hundred, maybe 1,000 miles away?
I don't know if it's a responsibility or if you should say be selfish for yourself. You don't want to have to, there's a lot of land that I know just from listening, we spoon feed our crops because it goes away. So we're adding 50 pounds of nitrogen here, 60 there, and 30 more at the end. And it really has helped us, catch up with the areas that hold their nutrients a whole lot better than we do, to be honest. Be a little selfish maybe and decide that you could probably use a little bit less expensive fertilizer if you were saving more of it from washing away. So there's different ways to do that. I do think the cover crop helps that. Even if, like I said, I'm not big on, growing it knee high and having to deal with black muck soils and, figuring out how to plant in that. But if it just grows, you plant it at the end of your crop and it grows a little bit a month in March and you knock it out ankle high, that still used up some nutrients and brought them back to the top that would have normally, flushed through.
Farming's only part of your story, right? There was a time I read something about a restaurant, and what was that all about?
I had 2 kids in college. A third one on the way, was at private high school, which was my decision, but it was stupid because I owed $70,000 tuition every year. Farming is up and down in this area. There's times that we make great money because, some of our rents and expenses aren't as much as some others. And then but when we lose money, we lose real money. We grow crops that are 30 bushel corn and 8 bushel beans, and follow it up with bumper, above national average. Averages are 140 corn, 40 beans, but that comes with 220 and 60. And then with the beans, say 70 and 20. That our averages aren't what we grow. Very seldom do we grow an average crop. It's either a really good one or a real bad one. So anyway, I was trying to level out that income and I had a building that I remodeled that was an old country store. And a buddy from mine at church decided he wanted to open a restaurant. And I said, nobody else is knocking down the door to use the building. Let's do it. So he opened it. He got ill, didn't last but 2 years. Told my wife that if another one comes in and doesn't work, then it's, that use is gone. It becomes a reputation of not a place a restaurant works. So I jumped in, not knowing how to do any of it, cranked open a farm to table because I had a story I could sell with the farm aspect. I started growing a little bit of produce for it ourselves, buying some fresh local beef cuts, and it kind of blew up. It became really nice and saved my butt for a couple years, and had lines out the door 3 nights a week and just was on top of the world. But that was at that point, I would say before COVID, is when I decided that I could not do that very long. I was spending, we farm, my family, brother and nephew and I, was my father's too, but he just passed. But it was 5,000 some acres scattered over 50 miles. And then I was trying to run a 6-7 day a week restaurant, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And it just was going to kill me. So I decided to get rid of it. But my problem was I didn't sell it or lease it at that point. And then COVID came in a few months later. And then I had to ride the shutdowns for a couple of years and just started losing money at it, to be honest. But it was coming back around to it was going to, get busy again. And I knew that I physically couldn't do both things. Didn't want to. So I have leased it out to another family, and they have opened up a couple weeks ago, and they've got a wonderful restaurant, kept my name, kept a, similar business plan. And all I have to do is keep the building upright and I get a check instead of having to do extra work.
You're the smart one there.
I don't know yet, but it's definitely, my life has changed. I went from grain farming to restaurant and grain farming, and back to just doing grain farming feels like a vacation, to be honest.
You mentioned the farm to table story. Did they keep that?
Yes. They are slow getting back into the local beef because everything is so hard to come by right now. So their menu does not have it, but they have the connections and are planning to, do steaks with, right now they're doing like a steak tenderloin thing that's different, but they've got the plans to go back into the steak. We're right here. We've got a whole lot of fresh seafood, and that's the calling point. And it's right on the main drive from the roads. 17 South was the old 95 before 95 was built. So it comes from, DC, Fredericksburg through us to Norfolk, and it's just to the beaches. It's so much traffic in the summer. It's hard not to have a good summer business there. The secret is trying to keep it rolling through the winter
and keep the locals coming. Because the travelers are one thing, the wayward folk, but those who live around there. Yeah,
they'll run. It's kind of gotten to be 4 to 5 months now instead of 3, but they roll pretty steady from May to October. But the rest of the time, you still got to keep your employees going. And that's the hardest. It's not the hardest point. It's an easier time to work, but it's hard to keep your business fluctuated like that.
I seem to remember you tweeting about employees and workers, and you were saying this before COVID, that finding help was hard to do. Do I recall that correctly?
Oh yeah. It's a different era. There are people that still want to work, but they tend to go find their own business because they don't want to have to work with other employees that don't want to work. So the best people, I'm not saying it's a generational thing, because I've met some young people that are just brilliant and smart. They're figuring out how to start their own business. And you're left with a workforce that is used to not working for their money. And to be honest, at one point I had 24 employees that 12 people should have been able to do the job. You didn't know who was going to show up. You didn't know how long they were going to be there. And so you ended up with like 4 or 5 full-time and a bunch of part-time people that you could mix and match to try to keep things going.
One more thing on the farm to table and the business side of things. In your location, given where you're at, you mentioned some big cities around, do you feel I won't say burden, but a responsibility to educate those who might not be as well versed in the goings on a farm versus somebody else? Like you may have a harder job because of where you're at?
Some of it's harder. It's just the people that are interested will listen and talk to you. The problem is there's just so many people in the world now that aren't interested in understanding. They've got their own life and they want to be fed well and be on their way. And yes, they want to tell their friends that they went to a place and ate local beef and seafood and all, but they don't care. What it is. I have a funny story with that. There's a catfish product that I could buy frozen, and it's wonderful product. Whoever is raising those catfish are doing a wonderful job and making a good product. And I switched to some local fresh muddy water catfish that I got 5 miles from my store, and nobody wanted that. They wanted the bright white catfish that they didn't. It was one thing to try it. They wanted to try the local catfish, but then they honestly said, the other's better. And it was. And I agreed with them, and I went back to the frozen product because it was more consistent. And, the people you're buying it from always had a box, where the people down the road didn't always go fishing that day. There wasn't always a supply either. So it's just a different world. You learn so much when you get into that of, how people really have to source things and kind of piecemeal it all together. It's very hard to run a busy restaurant with just local source stuff, because it's one thing you say, yeah, I'm going to feed 30 people on a Friday night. You could do that. But I would have Saturdays and Sundays where 600 people came through there. And to have enough source local food that everything, didn't run out was a bind. You almost had to get into a supply network. And they actually have gone there. I will say that some of the Cisco's and other things that you hear worried about have gone into North Carolina and Virginia and different places and signed contracts with big, well-known, beef herds, and they will tell you where they got it from. And so it's the local source does not have to be the man in the overalls down the street anymore. There's actually companies that are feeding that need.
They don't have to play into the stereotype?
They don't. Although I have found out this spring I bought overalls for the first time other than winter. And I was working in them all spring and I'm not one to care if somebody teases me. And I got teased a little bit. I was like, look, I don't have enough butt for a belt to work, and suspenders hurt my neck, and this grabs my belly and my shoulders, so it doesn't hurt. So I enjoyed wearing them.
I got to remember that. That's a good line about that. I may have to. That could be a bumper sticker right there. What you're saying, yeah, with the overalls. How'd you find market to market?
Market to market is very big on my Twitter side. I do a little bit of Facebook, a little bit of Instagram, all that, but I don't have time, but to be addicted to one or two of them. And it's Twitter is what I've been addicted to. And to be honest, Twitter has been wonderful because as a small farmer, I'm not a small farmer, but as a individual in Virginia, by being on Twitter and being recognized, I can literally talk to professors at Purdue, at Iowa State, whatever, and they will get right back to me. I have the analysts that have been on your show for years, you know, they don't always agree with me, but they will talk with me. And so I actually knew a whole lot of the people that, you know, you have on your show to try to educate Iowa farmers are people that I have had conversations with. So I end up clicking on when it's shared and watch it a lot. I won't say I watch it all the time, but I watch it a lot. And like I said, I've sent in questions that you've used for a while. I was actually the one that sent in the question to Miss Martin to ask about where she thought prices could go, whether they could go to 20, and she said 30. But it just, I asked that question because I knew kind of she would answer it. She's one of the people that I know that, you know, she's not worried about what everybody thinks about her. She will say what's possible. And you need that. Too many of the other group are very nice people, but they want to get along with the group that they're friends with. And so they won't ever rock the boat too far because they don't want to be, you know, called out as saying something seems foolish. But you need a little foolishness. You need a little bit of what could happen if everything goes crazy. And that's kind of where I had been for a couple of years, was you can't print $12 trillion and markets not go crazy at some point. And it took it 8 months longer than I thought it would to happen. But I do feel like that is 80% of where we're at. It didn't matter. You know, the other problems come from the fact that inflation happened, and then more people started scrambling to get a hold of the products before they cost more. So then you ran out of more of it. And then, of course, dry weather in different parts of the area. But that happens every time. You know, you lose crops when it's $3 corn. It just goes to $3.70. But when you print $12 trillion, that 370 can be 770 instead. And that's kind of what's happened. I just, at this point, I feel like the real risk is if we blow all the economies up, and if the governments truly, you know, contract, then how can these prices stay? And I think that's more of a risk, even though that, you know, the dollar's worth less and it makes everything else that's priced in dollars worth more. I feel like the next risk will be governments literally just can't pay for it anymore. And so then the supply and demand comes back into play. But hopefully we go back to $4.50 and $5 bases instead of $3 and $3.50 bases.
Does a analyst who rocks the boat give good analysis?
Yes. I don't say that that should be the only person you ever listen to, but if you don't know what could happen either direction, the people that are always bearish and the people that are always bullish, as the answer for everything is there's somewhere in between. But until you know what the furthest thing it could go one way or the furthest it goes the other, you don't even know. Your brain doesn't comprehend where that range is. So you need somebody saying, you know, if everything goes crazy, we could have, you know, $30 soybeans. Well, yes. I mean, we are a dry summer in the U.S. away from $30 soybeans. That doesn't mean that's going to happen. You know, it seems like we're going to have a pretty large acreage of soybeans and, you know, whatever. But you hit a month dry spell in the Midwest, you know, where half of it's grown, and you can scare $20 into $30 real quick. That is a possibility. Do I think it's likely? No. But I do think $20 is likely this summer. It may not last but a day or two, but I feel like there's too many people watching ag markets and too much money floating around that want to invest, that we're going to probably hit a week where the whole world turns crazy and we have limit up 2 or 3 times. And the way things are now is then you're bumping $18, $19, you know, that week. And am I betting my farm on that? No, I'm selling a whole lot of $13, $14, $15 soybeans. But I will say that I feel like $20 is more likely than $10 from this point until fall anyway, until they actually know we have a crop.
You kind of joked a little bit about you could be an analyst on the show. What are you basing your opinions on. I mean, because I mean, it all makes sense, and I agree with what you're saying, but could you do it?
Oh, I could do it. Whether anybody would agree with it is another thing. But yeah, I am a talker. I understand that. But I live this. I literally am on my phone 8 hours a day, sometimes 12, and reading everything from everybody. And you kind of get a feel for, what the world is going through and who is nervous and who isn't, and who is always bullish and who's always bearish. But more than anything, it's just a matter of what is. I kind of base my theories on what do I think the odds are of it going higher or lower from now. And so when we were at $10, $11 beans all winter, I had no problem saying we're going higher. It just, the odds of going back to 8 at that point was probably 2%. And so at some point with the $12 trillion of money printed, that was going higher. Now that we're at $17 beans, I'm a little less, we're still going higher. I think we've reached more of an equilibrium. I think that's why things have leveled off a little bit, is I feel like we're at a point that we may not, I don't know, probably 60-40, we'd go lower instead of higher is the way I'd look at it. There's still a really good chance we hit $20 soybeans, but there's just a good a chance we're back at 13, in 3 months. So, yeah, I know you've just got to be flexible with what you see and just stay. I mean, and everybody that you have on there that's their job. They're looking at it 8 hours a day. I just don't get paid extra for it.
Well, do you see those that are trying to, you didn't say impress friends, but talk amongst their friends that come on that maybe have more, well, it could be this, but it could also be that, the more middle of the roaders is, need more of them or less of them?
I like them as people. I just don't know that they're helping farmers as much. I guess in the long run they are, because they take up, people are naturally emotional, and that takes some of the emotion out of it. But you've got to, at some point say, I've been looking at this. This looks crazy. I think X could happen. And then everybody go, no, that can't happen. And then 6 months later, as I try to do sometimes, you pull back up the tweet that X did happen. And you can actually do your business well by trying to take a little bit more risk instead of just saying the word salad that some of them say sometimes when they're not sure what else to say. Nobody that you have on there is bad at what they do. They're very good at their job, and they probably help farmers that aren't like me in a good way, that don't pay attention at all. They need to, kind of just glance from here to there and say, but every once in a while you need to hit a home run. Agriculture isn't like the other business. The thing that pisses me off more than anything is you can't go broke selling for profit, but you can. You can make a profit, and the profit be $10,000 a year, and that doesn't pay your bills, and you will be broke soon. You have to at some point make real money. And in commodity agriculture, that's the way it is. The commodities are naturally going to try to get back to equilibrium of where you're not making money, and it's a break even. So you've got 2 or 3 out of 10 years that you need to hit some home runs. And the people that don't ever recommend trying for a home run aren't doing a perfect service either, in my opinion.
So you're saying I need to retire the Walt Hackney line? It's hard to lose money taking a profit?
I honestly think so.
Okay, I get what you're saying. I do, Stephen, I do. However, but what if you're wrong on trying to take those home runs and you keep swinging and missing and you didn't take the profit? Then does that feel like you put yourself in more of a pressure situation to now we go from a solo home run, we have to have a 3-run or a grand slam here to make up for it?
You may be right. And it may be the way that my crops grow compared to others. Is I don't know what year I'm going to have a good crop. I will go into the year knowing what my crop insurance will pay and try not to overspend that in a large way, because I know that's pretty much my bottom line. But we don't even have the same crop insurance the Midwest farmers have, because the averages are lower. And so you end up paying $80, $90 an acre to get 130 bushel coverage, where they can get 130 bushel coverage for $10 an acre. But my 130 will pay a lot more of my expenses than their 130. I understand that. But I think because we are 3 or 4 out of 10 getting bumper crops, that I feel like that I need to get bumper prices 3 or 4 out of 10 also. And it doesn't always work the same year. Sometimes you get the bumper price. Like a lot of times, y'all will have a good year and we have a drought, and our price won't go up any because we don't grow enough to influence the national price. But every once in a while, we will have a crop and the Midwest will get a hot and dry scare, and we get to double up on price and yield. And you got to be ready for that. If you miss it, you might be 8 more years before it comes around again. That doesn't mean that you don't ever sell ahead. I have a pretty strong theory of I sell a third at planting, a third in June when it's the scare, the mid-June scare when everything tends to go up, and then take the last third and either bin it or sell it if the price is good in the fall. And so I'm not doing this on all of it, but I am not the person that says sell 85% of your production at crop insurance price because it's guaranteed and there's no way you can lose. You can lose if your neighbor is making $400 more an acre than you are this year. You can lose because you're competing for resources with them down the road. And so you can't just skate by unless you pretty much, if you own your land and you don't have huge expenses, then yes, life is easy to just plant it, grow it, sell it, and it goes. But if you're scraping by in a competitive world, then you need to be competitive also.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, I told you I'd let you ask some questions. Do you have any questions for me or the show?
How much outside of Iowa do you look at? I know y'all get metrics and all. Can you figure out how far your range is?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're on in 20 states. So we know we're on those stations. I look at YouTube numbers and I can see, our heaviest states are, of course, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Wisconsin. And the one that has really started to pick up in the last, I'd say, year to 2 has been Texas. Okay. And we're on in one station, or we have on and off again in far western Texas, almost New Mexico. So I don't know where those numbers have come from. California, we have a station in the Central Valley. I don't know where everybody comes from on the web. Right. I should, but I have to always kind of impress upon people, especially on this podcast, is, you're not just talking to Iowa, because there's plenty of competition in Iowa for other services to watch. I mean, we're different. We've had people come through our show and say, we need to be doing something daily. Well, how many text alerts do you think you could have had if we were talking when the market was still open in just this 30 minutes? I mean, your phone could have bloop, 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 bloop the whole time. Right. It's impossible to keep up with that type of technology. So the history of the show in 47 years has been a weekly look, a perspective of what has happened and what might come ahead. So hopefully that's beneficial to anybody outside of Iowa.
Yeah. All right. I should know, but I haven't done a deep dive on you. What age is your family? How is your family?
I have 2 boys, and they are a sophomore and a 6th grader. And the sophomore has now taken the mantle as the tallest Jaeger. He's knocking on the door of 6 foot if he's not over it now, which is huge for us. We're a short people. And his little brother is not so little anymore as he gets, right. He's past grandma, and actually he's past both grandmothers. And, they don't have a connection. So this is the home place where my mom still lives in Northeast Iowa. And, neither of them I've, tried to get them interested in agriculture, at least inform them about what's going on. And I don't see either of them taking a strong involvement in the farm, but, life's strange.
Yep. So are you doing the travel balls fun stuff, or are they not sports people?
We are sports people to an extent. My oldest hasn't really, he's not to the athletic side of let's do travel baseball or anything like that. He liked playing baseball. We did Little League for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
He now umpires it. He loves the game. It's just athletics like that.
Right.
He runs cross country, loves it, loves the guys. Track, not as much. The younger one likes to play football, but I can't get him to do much else.
Sorry.
But it's they're different kids. Music has been a big thing for my oldest one. Show choir, that's a thing where we're at.
Right.
So
That's
he
competitive.
does that. That's competitive. He's got a guy on the football team and baseball team around him. So he hasn't shut himself out from athletics completely.
No. And there's no, I had 3 kids, and some did and some didn't. But I did live the life with one of the Little League and the travel ball, 10 months out the year. It was psychotic. I was going to talk you down if you were into that.
There's great Twitter or Instagram accounts of the travel ball dad or something. And
Yeah.
I have a nephew who does travel baseball and some basketball, and I go watch him play and I see what they go through. And I had some nieces that did it as well, but it's kind of fun. In fact, we were at a baseball tournament a couple weeks ago, and I recognized the guys on the other team as, hey, I coached with him before, coached with him before. So that was kind of fun.
All right. I'm done with my questions for you, but if there's anything else you want to hear from me, I am an open book.
All right. So if people want to talk to you, what's your does your Twitter handle have a meaning?
Uncle Hedge, it kind of, when I was back trying to get attention, I was, predicting prices. And I happened to do that in 12 and 13 when it was very easy to predict prices. So therefore, I would call stuff higher every day, and it went higher every day. But we're in the same type of thing we were this spring, where, you're in a money situation where, it wasn't whether the, a little bit of it, of course, was the dry weather in 12. I won't say that wasn't a little bit. But after that, it was just, when money becomes into commodities, then there are times that it's naturally going to rise higher. I was trying to take a person with 40 followers and make them more interesting. So I found it with Twitter, if you don't have followers, then nobody shares what you say and nobody hears it. So then you're speaking into the void, and that's no fun. So I tried to become interesting. I became the Hedge Whisperer, and the Hedge Whisperer would tell you, when the prices were going, and 7 times out of 10 it worked, and so I got a little following from that. And then whenever I get so I don't know where the prices are going, I go back to Uncle Hedge, because I'm not whispering hedges that great. But to be honest, when I started, I was on the state agriculture board. And so I was one of the youngest ones ever put on in Virginia. So I did that 8 years before I termed off. And I did not want to be Stephen Ellis talking nonsense on Twitter while I was on the state agriculture board. So I started out with a Hedge Whisperer name, and I could kind of say what I want. It also kept a whole lot of local people from following me. We're not a big Twitter world, in the area, but I noticed if somebody I actually knew started following, and out of the 12, 13,000 I got up to, it probably was 60 that were people that knew me, and half of them were friends of my kids, it just because they were amazed that I had that many followers. But even now, I'm probably, 40 or 50 people out of the following are local people, and they don't give me a hard time about it, because a lot of them I don't think are on Twitter enough to see everything I say. But
okay, you bring up a point of Twitter. I mean, so say your 4,000 followers were people that you all knew. Would that change the way you tweeted? Like if you had to run into them at the restaurant or at the store or at the school?
Definitely in 12, 13, 14, when I was just, I mean, I was all for shock value, attention grabbing. After I kind of like leveled off a little bit, I don't really say a whole lot more than I wouldn't say to anybody at this point. I may use different words and nomenclature than I would use in a conversation, but it's not, my ideas are, I've learned to just try to be honest. And if I think of something is funny, I say it's funny. It may hurt somebody's feelings, but hopefully it's funny. And if I say something that I think is going to happen in the market, it's because I believe it at that point. That doesn't mean that 2 months later, I don't believe something different, but I don't try to put anything out there now that I don't kind of back up. So no, at this point, with my family, some of my family follows and all that, I don't think about it anymore. But yeah, to be honest, when I started and I was trying to be, as I said, Ag Twitter needed a Ric Flair because because the arguments are no fun if everybody agrees with each other. You needed somebody who came in brash and cocky, and that probably wasn't me, but it was fun to play for a while. But now I feel like I'm confident, not cocky.
All right, Mr. Confidence. Let's close with this in the final couple of minutes. Let's stick your neck out. Is wheat done rallying? Does it have any more steam left in the next 6 months?
Wheat. This is how it normally goes, so I will go with the same type of thing. I feel like wheat is going to level off now for a while because we literally are getting into 2 to 3 weeks. It's going to start coming off in places that actually have a crop. It's coming off in Texas now, but they don't have a crop. But Oklahoma, Kansas, it just naturally, unless they find that the yields are awful, I feel like we level back off for a while. But wheat has a strong tendency to try to get you to plant more of it. And so September and October is a really strong period of time where you normally get your highest wheat prices. So I'm not saying that we don't see $15. We could see that the next day or two if, India gets hot and dry. Something happens in France and they don't grow the crop they're supposed to have. You could hit 15, but I'm looking for, 10 to 12 for the summer, unless corn goes crazy, and then maybe spike 12, 13, 14 again in the fall, just to get people to plant it again, because we need wheat. It's been a whole lot of crops lost.
We do. All right, so corn. Let's see. As we record this today, July corn did finish above 8. December corn is still in that 760 range. Where are we headed there?
I feel like we level back off again, like same thing. It's just a natural time around Memorial Day for things to level back off, and then they spike up the second week of June, and then it depends on what the weather does from there. If we spike back up even, to this or 780, 790 December corn, because my old crop's gone. I sold it all when the prices got good, I sold it. I didn't keep any gambling stocks, but I'm all in the new crop. We get back to 780 or something, I'm going to have a whole lot of it sold. But then if you hit a hot dry spell in, July, I mean, that's easy. As I was teasing the other day, somebody on your show said, if it gets hot and dry, prices go up. If it doesn't, prices go down. That kind of is where we're at because, the weather in June and July could take everything to areas that we've never seen before.
Would that spill over to soybeans too then?
Yeah, everything would have to go. The only thing that would change with that, even the soybeans would have to go some. But if something happens and this corn crop doesn't get planted and people switch over and plant an extra 5 million acres of beans, that could put a damper on that for a while. But there's no way that corn can be $8.50 and soybeans go back to 14. It's going to be a $17, $18 crop if corn's $8.50. So okay. Yeah, I actually want to sell $8 December corn and $17 November beans in June this year. That's my goal.
You're almost there right now.
Yeah, almost there. And I got lucky with my corn is I didn't sell hardly any of that early. So I've been pricing that from 750 on. But the soybeans I sold a lot early because I had my math. I was selling $8 wheat and I was selling $13 soybeans, and that double crop was going to guarantee me money, and it will. I won't lose money at that, but I sold a few more beans than I would have liked to.
All right, Stephen Ellis, I appreciate the insight. We're gonna put these words in form and pull them back in 6 months. See how you've done.
All right, no problem.
All right. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you for considering me.
My thanks to Stephen. Hope you learned something. I know I did. Always good to find more about agriculture around the country and around this great planet. Each episode comes out on Tuesday in both video and audio form. Hope you dial in. We'll see you next time.